Hey guys, it's Pineapple, and today we have a very big chapter of My Hero Academia that we have to talk about. This chapter covers everything to do with Dabi's backstory, right? Pretty much the life of Dabi that we didn't get to see completed in the backstory flashback that we got in the war arc. This episode, or this chapter at least, completes the rest of that backstory and gives us some really interesting information that has really interesting implications for some of my theories, and I don't think some of you are going to like it. So let's start talking about that by going right into the spoilers. And thanks to Rukasu or Rukasu on the Atsushi Discord, Shonen Paradise, I'm going to be reading it straight off thanks to them. So I want to say thank you, and let's do it. So the chapter begins of the gorilla cop going to Dr. Garaki's cell. The old man is talking to himself, saying that they spent a long time looking for seeds to cultivate. Seeds that nurtured a hatred towards society and that could become receptacles for All for One. We see a page showing Dabi and Shoto, and then cut to a flashback. Toya is burning on Mount Sekoto in despair, saying that he doesn't want to die and that he still needs to show Endeavor what he's capable of. Just as he's practically charred, a man in a suit and hat who appears to be All for One emerges from the flames. Now, I'm looking over at you guys for this one, right? Because if you've been following me on Twitter, if you've been, checking out some of my videos, I have this theory, right? I have a pair of theories that go very hand in hand, like this. One of them is the dad for one theory, but let's put that to the side for now. But I have this theory that Tenko was actually born quirkless, and the man that brought him home that day, where, his powers started freaking out and everything, was actually All for One. But some people told me, hey, that doesn't look all that much like All for One or something like that. Like, he's wearing a hat. Maybe that's just a police officer, even though that's not the clothes that police officers wear. It's the same suit as All for One. The one thing that we didn't have was this hat that we've never seen All for One wear until this chapter, where we see All for One pulling up on Dabi back, in an older time, setting things up for the future, wearing the suit and hat, and it looks exactly the same as the drawing of the low quality drawing that we got of the man who brought Tenko home. So that means that it's very, very likely that All for One gave Tenko his quirk. But we're going to get into that in a separate video, but I just wanted to go into a little side tangent on that because I find that just so damn rewarding. So let's continue with the spoilers. So we covered how All for One emerges from the flames. On the next page, Toya gets up from his bed in a mysterious facility, decorated with various childish decorations. As soon as he awakens, several children notice his presence and become excited, saying that the sleeper has finally woken up after 3 years. When he tries to say something, wow, that's Obito-ish. When he tries to say something, he notices that his voice is different. The children call the doctor, and we're introduced to a bizarre figure with a sunflower face. Toya asks him to let him out, and the doctor refuses, saying that from now on, he will live here with his new family. So I find that really interesting as I'm reading this for the first time, because that means the doctor pretty much raised Dabi, right? Which I know we got some hints from that, like from them having some sort of like knowledge of each other when the doctor was talking about the Nomus and whatnot, and picking Dabi specifically to test the Nomu and talking about him having a good eye and stuff like that back during the My Villain Academia arc. But this really ties them together in a way that is probably really hard to see coming, right? Because the main theory associated with Dabi, as we all know, is going to be the Dabi is Toya theory. But this is like a whole other side theory that could have been going on, right? About like whether or not Dabi and the doctor knew each other and what sort of like relationship they had. Like if, the doctor saved Dabi, or like what happened kind of in that time period that we don't know about Dabi's life. But now we know that, as part of keeping Dabi alive, All for One brought Dabi to the doctor. Or I guess I should be saying Toya, right? Because at this time he is Toya. But he brought him to the doctor, and the doctor raised him with other children. And I'm willing to bet when we get the scans for this chapter, his grandson, the one that we know became the Nomu that snatched Deku in the Stain arc, will probably be amongst that group of children, right? The one that we saw like in the very first chapter hanging out with Bakugo and Deku. I would probably place a bet that he's gonna be in this group of children, which is just like, it's horrifying when you consider that the doctor is running clinics all over Japan that cater to telling children whether or not they have a quirk, right? So like, he was definitely abducting some of them. So really, Deku kind of won the genetic lottery by not having a quirk, because if he had a good one, the doctor might have taken him and turned him into a Nomu, and that would have sucked because we would have had no story. So continuing on, Toya cannot accept this because he said many horrible things to his family, and his father must be worried about him. Just then, a voice comes out of a monitor and informs the boy that none of this will be possible, because restoring his body was too difficult. The missing parts have been patched up using other people as a base, so he will no longer be able to use the full power of his flames. They would have liked to recruit him at the peak of his potential, but he turned out to be a failure. Hearing these words, he remembers what Endeavor used to say and despairs. However, the voice says that they might be able to revert his body to its former state if he stays there with them for a while and becomes part of the family. Touya tells him to shut up and says that he doesn't want anyone to teach him anything, and we see Garaki in present time saying that it was already too late to convince him. Not even an all-controlling man like All For One could undo the impact Endeavor had caused on that boy's head. They were keeping several children as replacements in case something happened to Shigaraki, and Dabi was supposed to be one of them, but he burned down the facility and ran away. Now that is very, very interesting information because, like I've been saying for a very, very long time, to a certain extent, the whole Nomu program is part of ultimately making Shigaraki another All For One, right? Because what are they trying to do with the Nomu program? They're trying to create a body that can house all of the quirks that All For One comes with, right? That's why you have the Nomu, who are like this stage of mindless creature who have all these quirks stuffed into them, but they can still be controlled to a certain extent or let loose and targeted towards certain individuals, right? Then you have the smarter versions of those who can hold even more quirks and are even more powerful. Then you have someone like Nine who really fits into this perfectly, because we kind of see more of the motivation for why the doctor gave Nine the budget version of All For One, because Nine is pretty much as close as you can get in the timeline of My Hero Academia to having someone like Shigaraki, right? Like, Nine was the almost completed version of the surgery that we saw Shigaraki go through in the last season, or at least begin going through in the last season, and that he will be completing that process in next season, right? So with that said, it's really, really cool to get that information that Dabi was looked at as a potential successor for All For One, because that's really, really interesting. And I like the fact that Dabi was just uncontrollable, right? Even for someone like All For One, whose whole character is around controlling everything, he couldn't get a handle on Touya. The Gorilla Cop is confused by the fact that this was all an All For One plan, but the doctor says they should be careful because that boy survived in some way beyond their knowledge, since his body in that state shouldn't even last a month. Now that's interesting, because that implies that even with the doctor's help, even with All For One's help, there's something still weird at play here with Dabi. Like, there's like, even the doctor who knows All For One's power and like knows all the variables at play to a certain extent is saying, hey guys, we all need to be sort of mindful that this Dabi guy could be far more dangerous than we think, because we aren't even sure how he's alive. Like, there's something up with this guy, which might lend to the theory that Dabi's quirk is actually like a phoenix quirk, and if he burned himself up, he can regenerate or something like that. It might kind of lend to that Dabi has another trick up his sleeve, or like a quirk awakening coming, where he's gonna do something absolutely nuts and like really blow everyone's minds, and even maybe become a threat to someone like Shigaraki or like All For One or something like that, even though he'd have no reason to fight them, right? Like, Garaki says he was surprised when Giran brought Dabi to the league, and when Dabi went to get the high-end Nomu and the two were alone, he comments that he knows it was the doctor who saved him from death. The doctor is happy that he realized this and asks how he survived, but Dabi ignores him and says that by looking at the Nomu, he finally understood what they intended to do to him if he agreed to stay there with the other children. The doctor then says that he told them that he managed to avoid death through his flames of hatred and resentment. Cut back to the fight, and Touya says that he has indeed gone back home. As his body was weaker, he had already given up on meeting Endeavor's expectations, but he still hoped that the family environment had changed after these 3 years. But when he arrived at the house, he saw his funeral altar and the infernal training to which Endeavor subjected Shoto. He realized that he was indeed a defective product, and his entire existence was already left in the past. And this is really, really sad, because it means he did get to go home. Like, we would have gotten Touya back still, you know what I mean, after he burned down the facility, but he saw the shrine, you know, okay, sure, they have a shrine for me, that's they should probably do that, but like, what was Endeavor doing? It's not like Endeavor learned from like what he did. He was still training up Shoto to pretty much be the next him, right, and seeing all this value in Shoto. So like, from Toya's perspective, it's just like, wow, no, this might be even worse than just becoming a villain and getting my revenge, because it's like, this man is never going to learn his lesson. Dabi says that as he exceeded his body's limits, his body started to become disfigured. He didn't want to meet Endeavor again weak like that, so he kept training his flames, and even though his skin burned, he felt no pain from the surgeries that were done on him. The The more he saw Endeavor on TV, the more his hatred grew, and the more he took inspiration on his techniques. We see a flashback of Touya in the house with the Touya altar that we've seen, right, where he's dead, and there's a photo of him praying at the altar in the Todoroki household, and he says that at that moment, Touya died, and in his place, Dabi was born. The doctor says that fire is an energy source that gives life to things and allows many others to function. However, Dabi's flames exist only to bring death, and this is not compatible with All for One, who longs to live forever. What follows is an impressive page of Dabi melting the top of the All Might statue, while Garaki says that these are the deadly obsessed flames that have escaped the reach of the King of Demons, and that's such a badass quote, right? It really harkens back to what I was saying a little earlier, that Dabi really is just this uncontrollable aspect. Like, he can't even be controlled by All for One, even though Shigaraki was. And that's why on Twitter recently I was saying that Dabi stock is just rising, because Shigaraki got controlled and Dabi didn't, right? So even just off that, right, I feel like Dabi is the best at this point. Finally, the Todoroki brothers prepare to use Flash Fire Fist at the same time. Dabi says he's going to destroy everything important to Endeavor, and this will be proof that he's alive, but Shoto says he won't let his stupid brother do as he pleases, and that, my folks, is the end of the chapter. So much madness, so many incredible details. We're gonna wait for the official version to come out to do a proper review, but man, isn't that an insane chapter? I'm really excited. You can see it on my face. So much validation I feel for other things that we're gonna talk about soon. And please be excited for my next video, because we're gonna be talking about Horikoshi talking about his next manga. What could that be, right? So we're gonna talk about that in a second. I'll see you guys soon. It's Vocal Pineapple. Peace.